Hello and welcome to the Tough Cover Podcast. As always, I am your host, Mark Henry Jr., and you can follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _ as you can see below me. And you can follow the podcast at Tough Cover Pod, and you can follow the Painted Lines where you're streaming this at the Painted Lines. And give at Everything's Fine a follow. I do my Philly Sports podcast over there with Kyle Pagan, as well as at Fox PHL Gambler. And you can see my content in all of those places. But on today's show, we go over my picks for week 8 of the college football slate. I also have one late night NBA game with 2 picks on it, which I will close the podcast out with. But before we get it started, my record on the Tough Cover Podcast is 61-51-2 at plus 68.5 units in the month of October. So if you have any picks for me today, if you have any thoughts on my picks for today, please leave them in the comments and I will put them up on the screen and I will talk them over. So let's get it started in here like the Black Eyed Peas. This is week 8 in college football at noon. My only bet of the noon slate. I'm going first half under 24.5 Illinois Penn State for 4 units. I'm taking this because I don't think Illinois can score against Penn State. The under is 6-1 in Illinois games this season, but I don't take full game unders as a philosophy. I take first half unders instead, especially in college football with clock stoppages after first downs, because crazy things can happen to ruin unders in the fourth quarter of college football games. Illinois is averaging 12.8 points per game in their last 5 games, averaging 8 points per game in their last 3 Big Ten games, coming off of being shut out against Wisconsin and their coach Brett Bielema saying there wasn't a single good player on the O-line. Don't know if you've heard Brett Bielema's comments, the Illinois coach, about his team, but wow, they were not positive. If I was a member of that team, I would not be playing very hard the week after. And the last 4 Illinois first halves would have went under this 24.5 total with an average of 12 points in the first half in the last 4. Penn State beat Indiana 24-0. Illinois lost to Wisconsin 24-0. I think we're getting a similar game here. So if it's a 24-0 game, that'll go under the first half, under 24.5. So since I'm on the under here, I am hoping we see Taquan Roberson, but it might be Sean Clifford. Either way, I think we see a 0 out of the Illinois on the scoreboard in Happy Valley at halftime. So let's move on to the next bet. At 3 o'clock, I have Purdue plus 3.5 versus Wisconsin for 5 units. All of a sudden, this is an important game in the Big Ten West race if Iowa falters. Purdue has the big win and tiebreaker over Iowa, and Wisconsin still has them on their schedule. Both teams control their destiny, so this is a big game for them. Everyone is going to expect a letdown spot here for Purdue due to recent upset history, including themselves and how they played after their Ohio State upset a few years ago, and I understand the sentiment, but I'll continue to fade Wisconsin at all costs. Wisconsin is 1-4 against the spread against Power 5 opponents, and they've been favored in every single game and are favored here again. Wisconsin has lost 8 straight against ranked opponents, and Purdue sneaks in here at 25 after their big wins. They do give Wisconsin a chance to either continue or break that streak. The Badgers quarterback Graham Mertz has thrown 7 interceptions and 2 touchdown passes this season. Wisconsin has only 2 interceptions and 4 takeaways this season, both the worst in the Big Ten. The Badgers currently rank 124th out of 130 teams in finishing drives. Purdue hung with Notre Dame way more than Wisconsin hung with Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is the only team that has scored 20-plus on Purdue. So you look at the offensive side for Purdue. Purdue's got the best offensive player on the field and maybe one of the best receivers in the Big Ten or the country in David Bell. No, not the Phillies' third baseman. He's a Purdue receiver. He had 11 catches for 240 yards and some touchdowns last week in their upset win. So I don't necessarily think it was just a fluke. I just think their best player showed up and balled out, and I could see it happening again. Bell has 4 100-yard games this season and has 17 receptions for 360 yards in his last 2 games. And they also have the best defensive player on the field, and George Karlaftis, who is going to be a first rounder and will be a top 10 guy on my big board next year. Spoiler. He is a run-stopping, pass-rushing stud who has 4 sacks in 6 games, and that's only because he needs to be doubled or else he would wreak havoc and have more. So that really opens up things for the rest of the D-line and the rest of the defense as a whole for the Purdue Boilermakers. And you look at the other side, the Badgers have won 14 straight in the series. They haven't started worse than 2-2 in league play since going 0-4 in 2008. Purdue hasn't beaten Wisconsin since 2003 and haven't beaten the Badgers at home since 1997. The streak ends. Purdue plus 3.5 in their first game this season as a home dog. It's also Purdue's hammered down cancer game. Some things are bigger than sports. So that is That is my play on that game. Purdue plus 3.5 versus Wisconsin, 4-5 units. Mr. Crockpot chiming in. What's up? What's up, Dives? He said if Temple beats South Florida today, they'll move to 4-3. Temple starts a 6'6" freshman quarterback named DeJuan Mathis, who stepped in week 2 and has been doing pretty well. I have heard some Temple buzz from my friends that this DeJuan Mathis guy is pretty good. Are you a believer in Pitt QB Kenny Pickett? Pitt's offense is pretty impressive. We'll talk about that in a little bit, Dives. Hang around. I am a believer, so we'll mention that in a little bit. At 3:30, I like UCLA in a pick'em versus Oregon. This is my bull, and that's why College Game Day is in LA. Chip built Oregon into a powerhouse, going 46-7 in 4 seasons there, including 3 straight years with 12 wins. It's, by the way, it's absolutely crazy that Chip Kelly was only at Oregon for 4 years. It felt like a decade back then. I digress. Chip has lost to Oregon twice as UCLA's coach, but last year was a nail-biting 38-35 loss in Oregon. This time, it's at the Rose Bowl in LA, and it's the game of the week. One of the craziest stats this season is that Oregon is 1-5 against the spread, with their only cover being their outright win in Columbus over Ohio State. If you look at Oregon outside of that Ohio State game, you would not think they were very good. I'm not sure what UCLA is, especially defensively, but they are 5-2 against the spread and 3-1 in the last 4 against the spread, as opposed to 0-4 in the last 4 against the spread for the Oregon Ducks. But I do think UCLA has a massive advantage at quarterback with DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, over Anthony Brown. I think they have an even bigger advantage at running back with Zach Charbonnet over almost anyone in the country, especially here, since Oregon's star running back CJ Verdell is out. UCLA has gained more rushing yards than its opponent in 13 straight games. Zach Charbonnet is averaging 21.8 carries for 114 yards rushing over his last 4 games. This has helped UCLA to be the number 1 field position team in the country in net field position. I brought that up with Army last week, who was number 2, and it came through with a cover, so I'll back that trend again. Oregon has the probable number 1 pick in Kayvon Thibodeau, but the defense struggles at almost every other level besides pass rush with Thibodeau. I've said that Oregon deserves to be considered for the playoff if they win out, even if it's unimpressively, but I don't think they'll be able to do that. I don't think they'll escape here today. I think the Pac-12's hopes at a playoff team die at the Rose Bowl on Saturday afternoon. So another comment here about DeJuan Mathis. Mathis showed good potential at Georgia. It is pretty big for Temple to get a Georgia transfer at quarterback. So a lot of reason to be excited for Dives and the Temple Owls fight for the cherry and white. So let's move on to the next matchup. Also at 3:30, Oklahoma State plus 7.5 at Iowa State for 4 units. I think people think that Oklahoma State is so public, but every gambler I see loves Iowa State. So everyone's citing Oklahoma State being public. They were so public that Iowa State is now public, in my opinion. Reverse psychology. I'm going with recent history. I know that Iowa State starts slow and gets going late, but Oklahoma State is immune to that. Brock Purdy is 11-2 with 26 touchdowns in the month of October. Those 2 losses, Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy is a man. He's 40. And he owns Matt Campbell. He's actually way older than 40 now. The I'm a man, I'm 40 rant is probably like 15 years old. He's probably like 55 now. But Oklahoma State, like I just said, has won the last 2 matchups with Iowa State. They've won 8 of the last 9 against Iowa State and 10 of the last 12, including 4 in a row in Ames. Oklahoma State has absolutely owned Iowa State. Oklahoma State is also out to its best start since the 2015 team opened with 10 straight wins. Oklahoma State is 6-0, and they've covered the last 4. They covered the 2 games they've been on the road for, and they've covered both games they've been underdogs in. The Cowboys enter the game off 3 straight wins over ranked opponents, which is a school record. Iowa State is only 3-3 against the spread, and surprisingly only 1-2 against the spread at home. I'm not sure who wins. I think this is a 50-50 ball, but I'll take Oklahoma State to cover 7.5 all day if I think it's a 50-50 spot. So Oklahoma State plus 7.5 at Iowa State for 4 units. Getting to our next game here at 7 o'clock, I like Nevada plus 3.5 at Fresno State for 2 units. This is a really good low-key matchup out in the Mountain West, out west on FS2 on Saturday night in Fresno. And I think both these teams are really good. These teams do not play on national TV very often. They will be on Fox Sports 2 tonight, so you will get a chance to watch them if you do so, please. I think Jake Haener, the Fresno State quarterback, is very good. I think Fresno's a very good team with a very good defense. But I think Carson Strong is great. And I think Nevada is rounding into form. They've won the last 2 games against Fresno. Carson Strong is 2-0 against Fresno the last 2 years and 1-0 against Hainer last year. They've also won 4 of the last 6 in this rivalry against Fresno. It's going to be a really fun matchup and the really fun test of Carson Strong against a good Fresno defense, probably the best defense he'll play for the rest of the way. I think he passes this test with flying colors. I still think he could end up being the number 1 pick in the 2022 NFL draft. He feels like a Detroit Lion in the same way Josh Allen felt like a Buffalo Bill. So I could see it. Moving on to the next matchup at 7:30, I like the NC State Wolfpack. Woo! -2.5 at Miami for 2 units. This is more of a bet against Miami than a bet on NC State. Miami is one of the 2 teams that haven't held a lead at any point of an ACC game this season. Miami is 1-3 against the spread against Power 5 teams and 2-4 against the spread in general. NC State really impressed me, molly-whopping but Boston College 33-7 as a 3-point favorite. NC State has not beaten Miami since 2008. I think they break that streak today. Devin Leary, their quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC, is on pace for the highest quarterback rating at NC State since one Phillip Rivers back in 2003. And he's the reason I have enough faith in NC State here to win and cover. So we're getting to what Dives talked about earlier. Am I a believer in Kenny Pitt? I'm going with a parlay here. I've got Pitt money line parlayed with Notre Dame money line for 2 units at +125. I trust Kenny Pickett, a.k.a. Kenny Heisman, potentially, to beat Clemson and continue their run to a potential ACC title. Pat Narduzzi has this team going. I never thought a Pat Narduzzi Pitt offense would be this explosive. I never thought Kenny Pickett would be this explosive. But they look absolutely fantastic. I love what I've seen out of Pitt. If I had to make a pick to win the ACC, it would be Pitt. And if they're going to do that, they got to take care of business today against Clemson. This is not your father's Clemson Tigers. I think Pitt wins the game. And I also trust Brian Kelly and Notre Dame to go 11-1 while no one cares and while no one is watching. But I really hope we kick our rival USC while they're down. I got to take the headset off to do it. But there you see them. There we go. Got the Notre Dame hat ready, even though the rest of the season after this is kind of irrelevant. It's a rivalry game, so I can get up for this. After this, it's going to be rough to get up for Notre Dame games. But my pick in the NBA tonight, that does it for my college football picks. My pick in the NBA tonight is a 10:30 game. I have 2 picks in this game. Grizzlies +4.5 for 3 units at the Clippers. And I also like the over 226 in Grizzlies Clippers. These are 2 teams that went way over that total on their opening night game. The Grizzlies against the Cavs played a game that was 132-121, scoring 253. And the Golden State in LA played a game that was 113-115 for 228. So both of those totals did go over this one. So I like Memphis +4.5, and I like the over at 225 in Memphis, LA. So 2 comments from Marky Mac before I do my summary here. Michigan versus Northwestern, first quarter under 10.5. It's a little too low for me, and that means that the total in the first quarter is 10.5. The first half, probably around 21. Yeah, I can't pull the trigger. It's just a little too low for me. A first quarter under I'd look at instead would be Penn State, Illinois. Do I know if Clifford's playing for PSU? Seems like it's as 50-50 as it gets. James Franklin's really playing it close to the vest. I don't think we know who is going to be the quarterback at Penn State this weekend, or this week, I should say, in a couple hours, I should say. But I don't really care. I have the first half under 24.5. I like it with Clifford, but I love it with Taekwon. So I am partially selfishly hoping that we see Taekwon. So let's run down my slate. I've got at 12 o'clock, I've got first half under 24.5 in Illinois, Penn State. At 3 o'clock, I've got Purdue +3.5 against Wisconsin. At 3:30, I have UCLA Pick'em over Oregon, 6.5 units to win 6 units as my bet of the day. Also at 3:30, I have Oklahoma State +7.5 at Iowa State for 4 units. I have Nevada +3.5 for 2 units over Fresno State. I have NC State -2.5 for 2 units over Miami. And I have the Grizzlies +4.5 at the Clippers for 3 units and the over 225 in Memphis, LA Clippers for 3 units. And then I also have the parlay Pitt Notre Dame +125, both on the money line for 2 units to win 2.5 units. So that does it. That does it for the Tough Cover Podcast. Thank you for being a part of the Tough Cover Click. Thanks for listening and enjoy the winners.